Hello improvisers, and welcome to Pro Tutorial, whatever number we're on here. And last time we talked about the descending chromatic bass motion called the lamento, which descends from 1 to 5 and is strongly associated with music of lament or sorrow. And we'll proceed now to discuss what happens if we go beyond descending 1 to 5 and we try to keep going all the way through the octave chromatically, and the Baroque solutions, one solution in particular that we're going to talk about today. And what I just played was the opening of the Prelude in A minor, BWV 543 of Johann Sebastian Bach, and this uses this particular chromatic bass motion. And of course it's in an arpeggiated form, but the bottom note functions as the bass. And it is a perfect example of this particular bass motion. So let's take a look at it, learn it, and see what we can do as improvisers with this particular motion. I call this the Überlamento because the lamento only descends, if we're thinking A minor, 1 down to 5. The Überlamento continues that descent all the way to 1. So it spans a complete octave. And so I just made up this kind of silly name, Überlamento. It's always very funny when I make up these names, and I'm sort of joking when I make them up, and then my students say them very, very seriously. They have serious discussions in the hallways about the Überlamento. I love that. So anyway, how does the Überlamento work? It's best to look at it in 3 voices, and we will start in a close space triad here, and then we'll reverse the upper voices and see what happens when we reverse them. As in many 18th century harmonic frameworks, the upper voices can be reversed, which is why we always are speaking about basses and upper voices, and it doesn't matter if it's a soprano or inner voice because so often those two can be reversed. So here we have bass on A and the upper voices taking a chord of the 5th. In order for this Überlamento to launch, we first raise the 5th to a 6th. So now we have chord of the 6th. And this of course resembles other motions like a 7/6. So the 5th raises to a 6th, the other voices drop together. Okay? Now the outer voices move together. Now the lower voices, outer voices, lower voices, both upper voices, and the bass does not move. Lower voices, outer, lower, outer, lower, upper only, and resolve. Now, several important details emerge from this. The first one is that this is not fully chromatic through the entire octave. We can do every note, but we cannot do flat 2. Okay? There is not a good way to cadence in this particular progression from flat 2 down to 1. That would be placing that chromatic note in that position will destabilize 1 as the tonic. So we can do every note, but not flat 2 in the Überlamento. Flat 2 can show up in other places, Neapolitan cadences and so on, but not here. So everything's chromatic, but not here. One whole step. Secondly, a pattern emerges that we keep trading which voice moves. The bass moves almost all the time, and the upper 2 voices take turns moving with the bass. So in this disposition, once we get to the chord of the 6th, the lower 2 move together, the upper 2 move together, lower 2, upper 2, lower 2. It's a very nice pattern. But when we get to the dominant, that pattern breaks and the upper two voices move together. So at this kind of midpoint, we have an exception. Now we continue. The lower two, the upper two, the lower two, the upper two. And now only the upper one, and we're done. So it's mostly a pattern of the upper voices trading, but that one place in the middle on the dominant, the upper voices move together and the bass does not move. Also, the upper voices sometimes move chromatically and sometimes diatonically. Sometimes it's a half step, sometimes it's a whole step. Let's take a look at that. Diatonic in the upper voices, diatonic. There's, of course, the raised leading tone, so we could still think of that as being in the key there in the alto. Diatonic. Aha, not diatonic. There. Back to diatonic. So here we observe that the upper voices move mostly diatonically. They mostly use the scale, except we have a little bit of use of raised sixth and raised seven. But other than that, they stay in the key, which is really fortunate because when you get going in this chromatic motion, it's very, very easy to forget what key you're in. You're just on some diminished seventh chord somewhere, and you honestly, you can completely forget where you were. So now that we have that pattern laid out, let's reverse the upper voices and note what happens. All the motions are exactly the same, except the fifth here has to move first, and now it's in the middle voice. Now we have the trading. Upper voices move together, and now of course, both of these are in the study document so that you can observe them. This is fairly difficult to memorize just because of these details, you know, who moves when is the exception, where is the whole step in the bass, and all of those details. So it does take some practice in order to get it learned. Let's take a look at the Bach. The opening is also in your study document. And we only have a couple of interesting things to observe here because this is such a textbook Überlamento. So if you just take these broken chords and solidify them, push them together, you'll just have a very simple triadic version of what we just did, starting here in third position of A minor. Now notice that it does not go to chord of the sixth before moving directly to the first bass motion. So you could say it skips a step, however you want to interpret that. But you can go directly from here to here. You don't have to do this first. I would say it's very normal in music to hear this 5/6 motion first. But again, you don't have to. Now it just goes along exactly as we discussed. And here's where the upper voices move and the bass does not. Bass continues to move. Now there we have one exception. Here, everybody moved in the Bach. And in the Überlamento, as I'm presenting it, we could follow the pattern and the alto middle voice would not move at that point. Okay, so again, another difference in the way Bach does this. Again, you know, it's absolutely, they're both correct, and they're both the correct language of the 18th century, but the reason I teach it the way I do is simply to give as much pattern as possible, as much consistency as possible, as it's easier to remember. So anyway, he continues. And here is where we should just about be done. And here is where he takes a digression. And with a scale mutation, moves us toward the subdominant. There we have the leading tone of the subdominant. And now the dominant again. And now he begins really another one. See? Now we're back almost where we started on 7 in the bass. So now we just do it again. Same thing. Upper voices move together on the dominant in the bass. And finally, now he begins a new progression moving upward. So in the Bach, what we actually see is 2 Überlamenti. Would that be the plural? Due Überlamenti. I'm mixing German and Italian. This is getting really weird. Sorry, everybody. 2 of these patterns with a little interruption, a little scale mutation, and interruption in the middle. The whole thing functions as a way of introducing the final arrival of the bass here in the organ pedals. And then he's going to build a rising progression over this pedal point. So there we see it in real life. So we see it in real life in this piece. Now, how to practice this and acquire it for improvisation? Well, you have to get to know it in both dispositions of the upper voices, in the third position and the second position. If you want to, you could learn it with the bass spaced farther apart, with an extra octave between, or in second position an extra octave between. That will sound fine. But just to keep your mind focused on where all the voices are, it's easier if you start with the triad in third position and learn that first. If you transpose this and learn it in other keys, you will get the pattern a lot more firmly in your mind. So let's go to a key that's not so close to A minor. How about F minor? Okay. What would we do in F minor? Okay, what's the first thing that we launch with? Raise the 5th to the 6th. Okay, now we start the trading. Lower voices, outer voices, lower voices, outer voices, dominant. Upper voices move together. Lower voices, lower voices move together. Outer voices, lower voices, outer voices, lower voices, and we're done. Okay, let's take it now to second position. Launch with the 5/6, outer voices, lower voices, outer voices, lower voices. There's the dominant. Dominant, stay there while the upper voices move together. Now, it's going to be outer voices. There they are. And remember that in the upper voices, you have That's where you have a little bit of chromaticism on scale degree 6 and 7. Mostly diatonic. Let's do one more. We just did F minor. Why don't we do C sharp minor? And let's do it first in third position. So who goes first? 5 to 6. Lower voices. Upper and bottom. Lower. Upper. Dominant. Upper voices move together. And now in second position. 5 to 6. Dominant. Upper voices move together. I promise you that will take some work to get to know that, and especially to do it in really distant keys. It is so easy to get lost and forget what scale and forget everything. Okay, so first thing is to just practice it in a wide variety of keys until it is not so scary anymore. And I've chosen not to be upset when I forget something. There are so many bass motions and so many realizations of those bass motions. For example, the scale, just the scale in the bass. How many bass motions, how many upper voice harmonizations realize the bass motion in a scale? Well, depending on how you count, about 8. Certainly rule of the octave, 5/6 ascending, 7/6 descending, Romanesca, stepwise Romanesca, Foberdon, the Corelli leapfrog. We haven't talked about all of these, but these are all ways that the masters taught of creating upper voice harmonizations just to a stepwise scale. So once you start learning all the bass motions they taught and used and the various solutions for upper voices, it gets to be quite an encyclopedia, and you can't include them all in every improvisation. I don't think you can even have them all really, really fresh in your mind at any given time. So there's nothing wrong with forgetting and then going, okay, this week I need to go back and review Uber Lamento because I don't think I can do it in B flat minor. That's normal, that's human. Don't be ashamed of that. All right, how would I use this in an improvisation? Well, if you take the rhythmic and thematic and textural ideas of your improvisation and you map them onto this voice leading structure, you can integrate it very, very well into an improvisation. The simplest way, because this is a 3-voice structure, is to show how you would do it with figuration prelude. That's maybe the least interesting, but the easiest to do. So if I were to take, let's say, second position, I'm going to double the bass in octaves, and I'm going to do one of our very, very familiar umpadita patterns. Well, this is easy. And so on. See, I already forget how it goes. So that works fine. But we can also move on to more interesting and sophisticated dispositions. For example, let's say we're doing some kind of more polyphonic texture, and I'm trying to generate a sense of independence of line and counterpoint. Okay, so there, I did the Uberlamento, and I used these little diminutions. That particular one, like 3/8 notes and then the downbeat over the bar line is very, very effective. You can use that over any structure, even a page one. Let's see. So, ba 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 ba, 3 notes, and then you move over the bar line. Another thing I was doing. I was jumping beyond my target note and then coming back and resolving it. So what we would call an incomplete neighbor, and that makes for a little bit more complex sound, a little more melodic, a little more lyrical. So that sort of texture will work very, very well. You know this piece, by the way? The B-flat minor prelude from Walter McLavier with the 2/16 notes, the little rhythm. That kind of thing also will work really well. So what could we do? Try to add a rhythm like that to the Uberlamento. So the Uberlamento works beautifully if you want strongly to affirm a minor key. It's one of the darkest progressions that you can have. And so anyway, that's really how it works. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and questions you may have. I do recommend just start off learning it in A minor first, in both of the upper voice dispositions, and then start moving outward to other keys, and then see if you can incorporate it into an improvisation during a minor section. Okay, it only works in minor. Don't use it in major. It's designed for minor. So I hope that you enjoy the Uberlamento, the challenge of learning it and the reward of using it. Enjoy. Ciao.